The parchment felt heavier than it should have when Captain Felix Brennan unrolled it in his tent, the wax seal of the Imperial command still warm from the courier's saddlebag. His eyes scanned the words once, then twice, and a cold weight settled in his stomach as he read the order that would define whether he remained a loyal soldier or became something else entirely. Locate and eliminate the orc insurgent known as Grusha Ironhide, age 19, last seen near the border settlements, considered armed and extremely dangerous. Felix had spent 8 years following orders without question, had earned his captaincy through blood and discipline. But as he stared at the crude sketch attached to the document, a young orc woman with intelligent eyes and a defiant tilt to her jaw, something fundamental shifted inside him. He knew the area mentioned in the dispatch. The eastern frontier was wild country, all rolling hills and dense pine forests where homesteaders carved out hard lives from unforgiving land. The war between the Empire and the orc clans had officially ended 2 years ago, but skirmishes still erupted like infected wounds that refused to heal. Felix had lost friends to orc raiders. He had reasons to hate them, good reasons worn into his bones by grief and exhaustion. Yet as he read the intelligence report detailing Grusha's supposed crimes, theft of Imperial supplies, harboring deserters, inciting rebellion among her people, the language felt too convenient, too rehearsed. He had seen enough manufactured justifications to recognize the smell of political maneuvering. The rain started just after midnight, a steady drumming against canvas that matched the rhythm of his troubled thoughts. Felix lay awake on his bedroll, the kill order beside him, and thought about the first time he had killed. 15 years old, barely more than a boy, defending his family's farm from bandits. The memory still tasted like copper and fear. He had joined the military because he believed in protection, in standing between innocent people and chaos. Somewhere along the way, the lines had blurred. Orders became easier to follow when you stopped asking why. Dawn came gray and unwelcome. Felix rose, dressed in his traveling leathers instead of his uniform, and packed light. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Garrick, found him saddling his horse in the pre-dawn gloom. "Early patrol, sir?" Garrick asked, though his tone suggested he knew better. Felix secured the last buckle and met the younger man's eyes. "Taking personal leave, family matter. I will be back in 2 weeks. And the special assignment from command. Tell them I am pursuing leads." Felix swung into the saddle, feeling the familiar creak of leather. "Tell them whatever you need to." He rode east as the sun broke over the mountains, turning the landscape into bands of gold and shadow. The kill order remained in his saddlebag, but he had already made his decision during those sleepless hours. He would find this Grusha Ironhide. He would assess the situation with his own eyes. And if the order was unjust, if she was just another casualty in a political game, then he would do what his conscience demanded, even if it cost him everything he had built. The frontier settlements grew sparser as he traveled, homesteads separated by miles of wilderness. Felix stopped at a tavern in a place called Millbrook, a cluster of buildings around a water wheel where suspicious farmers drank weak beer and traded news. He bought a meal and listened. Orcs had been spotted in the northern hills, livestock going missing. Some claimed it was organized raids. Others muttered about desperate refugees driven from their ancestral lands by imperial expansion. "You looking for work?" the tavern keeper asked, eyeing Felix's sword. "Information," Felix replied. "Heard there is an orc causing trouble around here, young female, goes by Grusha." The tavern fell silent, eyes shifted away from him. Finally, an old farmer with gnarled hands spoke up. "You Imperial," Felix could have lied. Instead he said, I am someone trying to understand the truth." The farmer studied him for a long moment. "Truth is, that girl saved my grandson's life 3 weeks back. Boy fell through ice on Blackwater Creek. She pulled him out, got him warm, brought him home on her back. Told my daughter to keep the boy away from thin ice and then left before we could even thank her proper." He took a long drink. "But I suppose that is not what the Empire wants to hear." Felix felt something loosen in his chest. "Where might I find her?" "Old mining territory, North Ridge. Abandoned silver works. If she is anywhere, she is up there." The farmer's expression hardened. "But if you are hunting her, you will have to go through folks who remember kindness when they see it." Felix left coins on the bar worth more than his meal and rode north as afternoon shadows lengthened. The mining country was treacherous, all loose shale and sudden drops where the earth had been carved open and left to rot. He found the entrance to the old silver works just as twilight turned the sky purple. The mine entrance yawned black and uninviting, timber supports still standing though weathered by decades of neglect. He dismounted and called out, "Grusha Ironhide, I need to speak with you." Silence answered him. Wind moved through the pines with a sound like distant ocean waves. Felix tried again. "My name is Felix Brennan. I'm not here to fight. I just want to talk." "Imperial soldiers do not want to talk." The voice came from above and behind him. Felix turned slowly and saw her perched on an outcropping of rock 20 feet up, silhouetted against the dying light. Even from that distance, he could see her size. Orcs were naturally larger than humans, and she stood perhaps 6.5 feet tall with shoulders that spoke of considerable strength. Her skin was the deep green of summer leaves, and her dark hair was pulled back in a practical braid. 2 small tusks curved up from her lower jaw, and her eyes watched him with the wariness of something that had learned to expect betrayal. "I am not here on behalf of the Empire," Felix said carefully. "May I approach?" "You are already here. Say what you came to say." Felix pulled the kill order from his saddlebag and held it up. "They sent me to kill you, called you an insurgent, a threat, dangerous criminal." He tore the parchment in half, then quarters, letting the pieces scatter in the wind. "I think they are lying." Grusha went very still. "Why would you do that?" "Because I have followed enough unjust orders to recognize one when I see it." Felix kept his hands visible, away from his weapons. "I talked to people in Millbrook, heard about the boy you saved, about the family you helped when bandits came. Does not sound like an insurgent to me. You do not know what I have done. Then tell me." She was silent for so long he thought she might simply vanish into the rocks. Then, with surprising grace for her size, she climbed down. Up close, Felix could see she was younger than he had thought, maybe barely past 18 or 19, with a face that would have been beautiful if not for the exhaustion etched into it. A poorly bandaged wound wrapped her left forearm, seeping through the cloth. "I stole from the Empire," Grusha said flatly. "Medical supplies, food, blankets, I gave them to refugees, my people. Humans too, sometimes, when they needed help. The Empire calls it theft, I call it survival." Her eyes met his, challenging. "So what now?" "You tear up one paper, but you are still a soldier. You still have duty." Felix unslung his pack. "Right now, my duty is to this." He pulled out his medical kit. "That arm needs proper treatment before infection sets in." Grusha looked at the offered supplies with something like confusion. "Why?" "Because infection kills, and you have people depending on you." Felix gestured to the mine entrance. "May I?" She led him inside where a small camp had been established in one of the more stable chambers. A fire burned in a carefully constructed pit with ventilation to disperse the smoke. Supplies lined the walls, some marked with imperial seals, others clearly scrounged from various sources. A bedroll, some books, tools. The space was neat and organized, the camp of someone who had learned to survive on very little. Felix worked by firelight, cleaning the wound on her arm. It was a deep gash, probably from a blade and definitely infected. Grusha sat rigid as he worked, watching his every movement. "This will hurt," he warned before applying the disinfectant. She made no sound, but he felt her muscles turn to iron under his hands. The wound was worse than he had thought, and as he cleaned it properly, he asked, "How did this happen, Imperial Patrol?" "4 days ago. They found a family I was helping, mixed household, orc father, human mother, 3 children. Patrol said the marriage was illegal, that the children were abominations." Her voice went flat, empty. "They were going to separate the family, send the orc father to a work camp. I intervened." "How many soldiers?" 6. "I hurt 3 of them badly. The family got away." She finally looked at him directly. "That is why the kill order exists, not because I am a thief, because I stopped them from destroying a family." Felix's hands paused in their work. He had heard rumors of such things, orders enforced by zealous officers looking to make names for themselves. The official policy was reconciliation, but official policy meant nothing in remote regions where authority was whatever a man with rank said it was. "Where is the family now?" he asked. "Safe. Across the border with my clan. They will not be welcome, humans never are, but they will be alive." She studied his face. "You really did tear up that order." "I really did. They will send others." "I know." Felix finished bandaging her arm with proper dressings, "which is why we need to find a solution that does not end with you bleeding out in a mine shaft." Grusha stood abruptly, pacing to the cave mouth. Her silhouette blocked the starlight. "There is no solution. This is how things are. The Empire expands. My people are pushed into smaller territories. Families like the one I saved are persecuted. People like you are sent to eliminate people like me who resist." She turned back to him. "Why should you be different? What makes you special?" Felix packed up his medical supplies, considering his answer carefully. "Nothing makes me special. I have done terrible things in the name of duty. Followed orders I should have questioned. But a few years ago I watched a village burn. Command said it was harboring insurgents. Turned out it was just poor farmers who did not want to pay increased tithes. By the time we realized the truth, 20 people were dead." He met her eyes. "I told myself I was just following orders, but those people were still dead. At some point, following orders becomes participation, becomes choice." The fire crackled in the silence between them. Finally, Grusha said, "You can stay the night. It is dangerous to travel these paths in darkness. But at dawn, you leave." "Agreed." They ate in awkward silence dried meat and hard bread, frontier food that sustained without satisfying. Felix noticed Grusha favored her injured arm despite the fresh bandaging. She caught him watching and straightened immediately, pride overriding pain. "How long have you been alone out here?" he asked. 3 months. "Since I was cast out." "Cast out by your clan," she nodded slowly. "I helped humans. Repeatedly. My clan leader said I was betraying our people, that every human I saved was a future soldier who might kill orcs. When I would not stop, he exiled me." A bitter smile touched her lips. "So now I belong nowhere. Too orc for humans, too human-loving for orcs." Felix understood that isolation more than she knew. "I have been thinking about deserting for 2 years. Every time I decide to do it, something holds me back. Fear, maybe, or just not knowing what else I would be. And now I tore up a kill order. Pretty sure that decision is made." Grusha laughed, a short, harsh sound. "So we are both exiles, how comforting." They settled into their separate spaces as night deepened. Felix took first watch, sitting near the cave entrance where he could see the trail. His mind raced through possibilities and plans. Command would expect a report within a week. When none came, they would send another team, probably a full squad. The torn kill order bought them time, nothing more. Around midnight, Grusha stirred from sleep, gasping. Felix turned to see her sitting up, one hand pressed to her chest, breathing hard. A nightmare. You all right? He called quietly. She took a moment to respond. Fine, just dreams. About what? The war. The things I saw. She was silent for a moment. I was 16 when the fighting reached my village. I watched my brother die defending our home from Imperial forces. He was 19. After the treaties were signed, they told us it was all regrettable but necessary. That peace was worth the sacrifice. Her voice hardened. They did not ask my brother if peace was worth his life. Felix had no answer for that. He had his own dead to mourn, his own guilt to carry. I am sorry, he said, and meant it. Why, you did not kill him. Maybe not personally, but I wore the uniform, followed the orders. I am part of the machine that did. Grusha rose and came to sit near the fire across from him. In the flickering light, her features softened. She looked less like the dangerous insurgent from the wanted poster, and more like what she actually was, a young woman trying to survive in a world that wanted her dead or broken. I do not hate all humans, she said quietly. I used to. After my brother died, I wanted to. But then I saw human families starving because the war took their men, children crying over graves, mothers with empty eyes. Pain looks the same in every language. She poked at the fire with a stick. That is when I started helping, when I realized hate was just more poison. That takes strength, Felix said. Most people choose the easier path. Blame, anger. I certainly did. They talked through the night, sharing stories like trading scars. Felix told her about growing up on a farm, about his father who had died of fever and his mother who had remarried a merchant and moved to the capital. About his first battle and the friends he had lost. Grusha spoke of her childhood in the clan, learning to track and hunt, the pride in her father's eyes when she made her first clean kill. The grief when war came and took everything. Dawn arrived too quickly, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold. Felix should have saddled his horse and ridden away. Instead, he found himself saying, "Let me help you." Grusha looked at him with tired eyes. "Help me how? You cannot change the empire. You cannot give me back my clan." "No, but I know how they think, how they operate. I can teach you to avoid their patrols, help you be more effective." He stood, brushing off his pants. "And you are right that more soldiers will come. When they do, it would be useful to have someone who knows their tactics. You would stay, risk your life for someone you just met." Felix considered the question. The honest answer was complicated, part guilt, part rebellion, part something he could not quite name. Looking at Grusha in the morning light, seeing the hope and suspicion warring in her expression, he realized that maybe for the first time in years, he had the chance to do something unambiguously right. "I would stay," he said simply. Over the following days, an unlikely partnership formed. Felix taught Grusha the patterns of Imperial patrols, the signals they used, the procedures they followed. She taught him the land, which paths were safe, which plants were edible, how to move through the forest without leaving obvious signs. They established a better camp deeper in the mine system where multiple exits provided escape routes. The work kept them busy, but Felix found himself increasingly aware of Grusha in ways that had nothing to do with tactics or survival. The way she moved with efficient grace despite her size. How her laugh, when it came, transformed her entire face. The fierce intelligence in her eyes when she planned their next supply run. He told himself it was just camaraderie, the natural bonding that came from shared purpose. But when she smiled at him over the campfire, something warm and dangerous stirred in his chest. Grusha felt it too, though she fought against it harder. A week into their partnership, after a successful raid on an Imperial supply depot, she confronted him. "This cannot be what I think it is," she said without preamble. Felix, in the middle of cataloging their acquisitions, looked up. "What do you think it is? You know exactly what I mean. The way you look at me sometimes. The way She stopped, frustration clear on her face. "We are from different worlds. This has no future." "I am not asking for a future. I am just existing in the present." That is a coward's answer. She was right, and they both knew it. Felix set down the supply manifest. "Fine. Truth. I find myself caring about you more than I should. More than is smart or reasonable. You are brave and kind and brilliant, and yes, I look at you and feel things I probably have no right to feel." He met her eyes. "But I am not going to apologize for it, and I am not going anywhere." Grusha stared at him, tusks catching the light. "I could hurt you without meaning to. I am stronger than you. In a moment of anger or fear, you would never. You cannot know that. I know you pulled a child from freezing water. I know you bled defending a family you did not even know. I know exactly who you are, Grusha." He stood, closing the distance between them. "And I trust you more than I trust most humans I have served with." She turned away, shoulders tight. "My clan would see this as the ultimate betrayal, falling for a human, an Imperial soldier no less. Your clan exiled you. You do not owe them anything. And what about your people? What would they say?" Felix laughed bitterly. "They already want me dead for treason. Might as well give them another reason." The tension broke slightly. Grusha shook her head, a smile tugging at her lips despite herself. "You are insane. Probably." They did not speak of it again for several days, but something had shifted. Their movements around each other grew more careful, charged with awareness. When Felix checked her bandages, his fingers lingered a moment longer than necessary. When Grusha passed him during their work, she found excuses to brush against his shoulder. The attraction neither wanted built like storm pressure. 2 weeks after Felix had torn up the kill order, the situation escalated. They were returning from delivering supplies to a refugee camp when Grusha suddenly pulled him off the trail, hand over his mouth. Body pressed against his as she held them both flat against a rocky outcropping. Felix's heart hammered, though whether from danger or her proximity, he could not say. Voices carried from the path below. Imperial soldiers, a full squad by the sound of it. Felix recognized the voice of the squad leader, a captain named Drust, known for his efficiency and complete lack of mercy. "The deserter Brennan was last tracked to this area," Drust was saying. "Command wants him found and executed. As for the Orc insurgent, standing orders remain, kill on sight." "What if they are together?" another soldier asked. "Then we kill them both. The Empire does not negotiate with traitors or monsters." The patrol passed, boots crunching on gravel. Grusha and Felix remained frozen until the sounds faded completely. Only then did she release him, stepping back quickly. "They are hunting both of us now," she said. "Apparently my desertion has been noticed. This is my fault. If you had just killed me like they ordered, stop." Felix gripped her shoulders, forcing her to meet his eyes. "I made my choice. I would make it again. Every single time." She searched his face, and what she found there made her breath catch. "Felix," the moment stretched between them, fragile and vital. Then Grusha pulled away, all business again. "We need to move the camp. If Drust is in the area, nowhere is safe. He is known for his tracking skills." They spent the rest of the day relocating deeper into the mountains, to a cave system Grusha knew from her childhood explorations. It was harder to access, but infinitely more defensible. As they worked through the evening, transferring supplies and covering their tracks, Felix's mind raced through their options. They could not run forever. Eventually they would make a mistake, or simple bad luck would catch them. They needed a more permanent solution. That night, as they sat by a carefully shielded fire, Felix voiced what had been building in his mind. What if we went public? Grusha looked up from the harness she was repairing. What? With everything. The unjust kill order, the family persecution, what we have been doing. He leaned forward, energy animating his words. There are people in the Empire who still believe in the peace treaties, who want reconciliation. If we can get our story to them, they would call us liars, traitors. We have no proof. We have the family you saved, the farmers you helped. Witnesses. Felix's mind worked through the logistics. There is a journalist in the capital, woman named Maris Chen. She investigated war crimes during the conflict. If we could get word to her, that is a massive risk. Everything we are doing is a massive risk. At least this way we might change something instead of just surviving day to day. Grusha was quiet for a long time, her strong hands still on the leather straps. Finally, she said, "My whole life, I was taught that humans could not be trusted, that they would always betray us in the end. You are making that very difficult to believe. Good, because I am going to keep being difficult about it." She smiled then, a real smile that reached her eyes. "I can tell." They began planning in earnest. Felix had contacts from his military service, soldiers who had grown disillusioned with the current command structure. He started sending carefully worded letters through trusted channels. Grusha reached out to refugees and mixed families she had helped, asking them to document their experiences. It was slow work, dangerous work, but it gave them purpose beyond simple survival. A month passed. Spring moved toward summer and the mountains erupted in wildflowers. The wound on Grusha's arm healed cleanly, leaving a scar she wore without shame. Felix taught her to read common script better, and she taught him some words in her clan's dialect. They fell into rhythms domestic and strange, taking turns with camp chores, arguing over the best way to set snares, sharing meals as evening settled into night. The attraction between them continued to build, unspoken but undeniable. Felix would catch himself watching the way firelight played across her features, the strength in her hands as she worked. Grusha found her gaze lingering on his smile, the careful kindness in how he treated everything from injured animals to damaged equipment. Neither spoke of it directly, both aware that acknowledging the feeling would force decisions neither was ready to make. Then came the night the dam finally broke. They had spent the day gathering intelligence on a particularly brutal imperial officer who was terrorizing mixed-species families near the border. The work had been exhausting and emotionally draining. Grusha returned to camp silent and tense, her shoulders carrying weight beyond the physical. Felix found her sitting outside the cave entrance as stars emerged, her face tilted toward the sky. He sat beside her without asking permission, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Talk to me," he said quietly. "Sometimes I wonder if it matters," Grusha said. "All this work we are doing, all the risks. The Empire is vast and we are just two people. Two people can start something bigger than themselves, or two people can just die forgotten." Felix turned to look at her profile, strong and beautiful in the starlight. "Then I would rather die forgotten beside you than live safely having done nothing." Grusha met his eyes and something in her expression cracked open. "You should not say things like that to me." "Why not?" "Because it makes me want impossible things." "Like what?" She stood abruptly, pacing. "Like a future where this does not end in tragedy, where we are not hunted. Where I could," she stopped, fists clenched. "Where I could tell you what I feel without it being foolish." Felix rose slowly, his heart a drum against his ribs. "Tell me anyway." "Felix, tell me." Grusha turned to face him fully, and in the moonlight her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. I am falling in love with you, have been, maybe since the moment you tore up that order. And it terrifies me because everyone I have ever loved has been taken from me, and you," her voice broke. "You made yourself a traitor for me, changed your entire life. How do I protect someone who has sacrificed so much?" Felix closed the distance between them, reaching up to cup her face with both hands. She had to lean down for him to reach properly, and the gesture was so tender it stole his breath. "You do not protect me from my own choices," he said. "You let me stand beside you. You let yourself feel what you feel. And for the record, I am falling in love with you too. Have been, probably since I first saw you perched on that rock, fierce and proud and refusing to back down. We come from different worlds. Then we build a new one." She kissed him then, or maybe he kissed her later, neither could say who moved first. Her tusks required a slight angle adjustment, but they figured it out quickly, the kiss deepening as weeks of tension finally found release. Felix's hands moved to her shoulders, her back, feeling the strength and warmth of her. Grusha lifted him easily and he wrapped his legs around her waist, their mouths never separating. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Grusha pressed her forehead to his. "This is complicated. Everything worth having is. They will hate us for this, both sides, human and orc. Let them. I choose you." She carried him inside the cave to the sleeping area they had carefully kept separate until now. The boundaries dissolved naturally, inevitably. They made love slowly, learning each other's bodies with wonder and care. Felix traced the scars on her back from old battles. Grusha marveled at the softness of human skin under her calloused hands. They fit together despite or because of their differences, two souls finding unexpected harmony. Afterward, lying tangled together under shared blankets, Felix felt something settle in his chest. Purpose. Belonging. Home. "I was never this person before," Grusha said softly, her head on his chest. "Never someone who could hope for happy endings. Maybe we both needed to become different people to find each other." "That is disgustingly romantic. You love it," she laughed, the sound free and genuine. "Unfortunately, I do." The next morning brought a reckoning they had both been avoiding. One of Felix's contacts sent word through their network. The journalist Maris Chen had received their information and wanted to meet. But Imperial intelligence had also intercepted some of their communications. Captain Drust was closing in, and he was not coming alone. A full company had been dispatched with orders to end the situation permanently. Felix and Grusha stood over the message, hands linked, facing what came next. "We could run," Grusha said, though without conviction. "Disappear into the deep wilderness. They would eventually stop looking. And live in hiding forever. Let nothing change." Felix shook his head. "That is not living. That is just slow dying. The alternative is fighting against a full company. The odds are not good." "When have the odds ever been on our side?" Grusha smiled grimly. "Fair point." They spent the day preparing, not just for battle, but for the possibility of something beyond it. Felix wrote letters to every contact he trusted, explaining everything, asking them to continue the work if he and Grusha did not survive. Grusha reached out to the refugee networks, to the families they had helped, asking them to share their stories regardless of what happened. The journalist Maris Chen sent word that she was en route with a photographer, determined to document the truth. The message included a location for meeting an old border fort, abandoned since the war's end, 2 days' travel north. "It is a trap," Grusha said immediately. "Probably. But if there is even a chance she is legitimate, we have to take it." They traveled through back country, avoiding main roads and known patrol routes. Felix's military training combined with Grusha's natural woodcraft made them nearly invisible. They reached the old fort at sunset on the second day, approaching carefully. The fort was a skeleton of its former self, walls crumbling and roof partially collapsed. But smoke rose from one of the intact buildings, and horses were stabled in what remained of the courtyard. Not imperial mounts, these were civilian animals, sturdy but unremarkable. "Could be real," Felix murmured, "or very good bait." They were both right. Maris Chen was indeed present, a sharp-eyed woman in her 50s with ink-stained fingers and a camera around her neck. She greeted them warily but with evident interest. "You are the deserter and the orc insurgent," she said. "Not a question." "We are two people trying to survive and do some good," Felix replied. "What we are labeled is someone else's choice." Maris studied them both, her gaze missing nothing. "I have been investigating imperial overreach in the frontier regions for 3 years. The stories you have sent match patterns I have been documenting. Persecution of mixed families. Fabricated kill orders against orcs who resist displacement. Officers making policy decisions that violate treaty agreements." She pulled out a notebook. "But I need your testimony, first-hand accounts, witnesses." They talked for hours. Felix detailed the kill order and his reasons for refusing it. Grusha described the family she had saved and the consequences of her intervention. Maris took notes rapidly, her photographer companion documenting everything. But as night fell, Felix's combat instincts began screaming warnings. The horses grew restless. Small sounds from outside the fort walls suggested movement, positioning. "We have company," he said quietly. Grusha was already moving, her hand on her weapon. "How many?" "More than we can handle directly." Maris looked between them, understanding dawning. "They followed you." "Or they followed you," Grusha said, not unkindly. "Either way, we are about to have very aggressive visitors." The attack came with brutal efficiency. Imperial soldiers poured through breaches in the fort walls, a coordinated assault designed to overwhelm. Captain Drust's voice rang out, cold and certain. "Surrender now and your deaths will be quick. Resist and they will be memorable." Felix and Grusha exchanged one look that communicated everything: love, determination, defiance. Then they moved as one, years of individual combat training meshing into something greater than its parts. Felix fought with precise economy, disarming rather than killing when possible, using the ruined fort's geography to his advantage. Grusha was a force of nature, her strength and speed catching soldiers off guard. She did not fight to kill either, but to incapacitate, always aware that every opponent was someone's son or brother or father. Maris and her photographer took cover but kept documenting, the camera's flash punctuating the chaos. The battle was brutal and brief. Felix took a sword cut across his ribs, shallow but painful. Grusha absorbed a crossbow bolt in her shoulder, the impact barely slowing her. They fought their way to the fort's main gate, covering Maris and her companion's escape. "Go," Felix shouted. "Tell the story." Maris hesitated only a moment, then ran, her photographer capturing final images as they disappeared into the night. Alone now, outnumbered 10-1, Felix and Grusha stood back to back in the center of the courtyard. Blood seeped from their wounds. Fatigue pulled at their limbs, but they stood together, unbroken. Captain Drust stepped forward, his expression disgusted. "You threw away your career for this." "For a monster, I threw away nothing," Felix replied, breathing hard. "I found something worth keeping. She is an orc, an animal. She is twice the soldier you will ever be and a better person than most humans I know." Felix felt Grusha's back against his, solid and warm. "If that makes me a traitor, I will wear the label proudly." Drust raised his hand to signal the final assault, but before he could drop it, new sounds erupted from outside the fort. Voices. Many voices, shouting in both common and the orc dialect. Through the gates poured an impossible sight: humans and orcs together. Farmers from Millbrook. Refugees Grusha had helped. Mixed families Felix and Grusha had protected. They carried torches and tools, makeshift weapons, and fury at injustice. The old farmer who had first told Felix where to find Grusha stepped forward, his face hard. "You want to kill that girl? You go through all of us." An orc woman, one of the refugees, moved to stand beside him. "She saved my children, gave up her own clan for us. We do not abandon family." Drust looked around at the growing crowd, at his soldiers suddenly uncertain in the face of this united front. The math had changed. This was no longer a simple execution. This was a potential massacre that would make headlines, documented by the journalist who had surely reached safety by now. "Stand down," came a new voice. An older man in imperial uniform rode through the crowd, his insignia marking him as a general. Felix recognized him: General Marcus Thorn, known as one of the few high-ranking officers who had opposed the war's escalation. Drust saluted stiffly. "Sir, these are confirmed traitors. These are two individuals caught in a broken system," Thorn interrupted. "And I have just been informed that a rather detailed exposé is about to run in every major newspaper in the Empire, documenting illegal orders, treaty violations, and persecution of civilians. Orders that, I am told, can be traced back to certain officers exceeding their authority." His gaze swept over Drust with disdain. "You are relieved of command, Captain, pending investigation." The standoff dissolved into confusion and arguments. Soldiers lowered weapons. The crowd of supporters surged forward, surrounding Felix and Grusha protectively. Someone, a human healer, began tending to their wounds. General Thorn dismounted and approached them directly. "You two have caused quite a bit of chaos." "Not intentionally," Felix said, wincing as the healer cleaned his side. "The best kind of chaos rarely is." Thorn studied them both. "I cannot give you back your ranks or your clan. The damage is done. But I can offer something else. Land. A homestead in the border territories, officially sanctioned. A place where mixed families can settle without persecution. You two have already built a network. Make it official. Show the Empire what cooperation looks like." Grusha, the crossbow bolt finally removed from her shoulder, spoke carefully. "Why would you do this?" "Because the war should have ended 2 years ago, but it keeps echoing in places like this. In bad orders and worse choices. If you can build something different, something that actually works, it might finally quiet those echoes." Thorn's expression softened slightly. "And because my daughter married an orc, I would like her to raise my grandchildren somewhere safe." The offer hung in the air, impossible and perfect. Felix looked at Grusha. She looked back at him. In her eyes he saw the same cautious hope blooming in his chest. "We would need guarantees," Grusha said. "Protection for the families already in our network. You will have it in writing, with imperial seals." "And the people who helped us tonight," Felix added. "No reprisals." Agreed. It was not perfect. It was not everything they had fought for, but it was a beginning, solid and real. "Then we accept," Grusha said. The homestead was carved from wilderness near the border, in territory that had once been contested, but now lay quiet under the treaty provisions. General Thorn was true to his word. The land grant came with official documentation, protection guarantees, and even some initial supplies. Felix and Grusha built their home with their own hands, aided by the families they had helped and by soldiers from Thorn's command who believed in what they represented. The house was a hybrid of human and orc-designed stone foundation like human structures, but with the soaring ceilings and open spaces orcs preferred. A fireplace large enough to heat the main room. Windows that let in light but could be secured if needed. Gardens for growing food. a barn for animals. It was practical and beautiful, a physical manifestation of two worlds finding balance. Word spread. Other mixed families arrived, asking if they too could settle nearby. Felix and Grusha welcomed them, helped them establish their own homes. A community grew slowly but steadily, not just orcs, not just humans. Something new. Maris Chen's exposé ran in papers across the empire, causing exactly the uproar General Thorne had predicted. Officers were investigated. Policies were reviewed. It was not a revolution, but it was change, incremental and important. Maris visited their homestead several times, documenting the community's growth. "You two have become symbols," she said during one visit, her camera capturing images of orc and human children playing together in the dusty road between houses. "We are just people trying to live," Grusha replied, but she smiled. Felix's mother wrote to him, cautiously re-establishing contact. His former squad mates sent letters, some supportive, others confused but willing to understand. The world was not transformed overnight, but connections were forming, bridges being built stone by stone. A year after they had first established the homestead, on an evening when autumn painted the sky in shades of amber, Felix found Grusha standing at the edge of their property, looking out over the valley they had made home. He came up beside her, slipping his hand into hers. "What are you thinking?" "That my brother would have liked this," she said softly. "He always believed orcs and humans could find peace. I thought he was naive. Turns out he was just smarter than me." "I think you are exactly smart enough." She laughed and turned to him, the setting sun catching in her dark hair. "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For tearing up that order, for seeing me as a person instead of a target, for choosing the hard path because it was right." She squeezed his hand. "For loving me when it would have been easier to walk away." "That was never a choice," Felix said. "From the moment I decided to find you, to see the truth, I was always going to end up here, with you, building this. Do you ever regret it, giving up your career, your old life?" Felix considered the question honestly. He thought about the man he had been, dedicated, disciplined, slowly dying inside from following orders that violated his conscience. Then he looked at their homestead, at the smoke rising from chimneys of a dozen homes where mixed families lived without fear. At the woman beside him, strong and kind and infinitely brave. "Never," he said. "Not once." Grusha pulled him close, careful of her strength as always, and kissed him as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. When they separated, she rested her forehead against his. "I want to make it official," she said. "Human custom. A wedding." Felix's heart jumped. "Are you proposing to me?" "I am." "Is that acceptable in your culture?" "In my culture it is perfect." He grinned. "Yes, absolutely yes." They married in the spring, in a ceremony that blended human and orc traditions. Grusha wore flowers in her hair and a dress that accommodated her build while still being beautiful. Felix wore his best clothes, no uniform, no rank insignia, just a man committing to the woman he loved. General Thorne attended, along with his daughter and her orc husband. Maris Chen documented everything. The families from their community filled every seat and spilled out into the yard. Former soldiers stood beside orc warriors. Children of every background scattered petals. The ceremony was conducted by an old orc priestess and a human minister working together, their combined blessings a symbol of the union itself. When Felix and Grusha exchanged vows, speaking of partnership and devotion, of choosing each other every day despite difficulty, there was not a dry eye present. "I cannot promise this will be easy," Felix said, holding Grusha's hands, "but I promise I will face every challenge with you. I will honor what you are, where you come from, and who you choose to be. I will build with you, fight beside you, and love you until my last breath." Grusha's voice was steady but emotional. "I thought I was meant to be alone, that my choices had put me beyond belonging. You showed me that family is not what you are born into but what you build. You are my home, Felix. My choice. My partner in everything. I will stand with you, protect what we have made, and love you with all that I am." They sealed their vows with a kiss as the community erupted in cheers, orc war cries mixing with human applause in joyful chaos. The celebration lasted into the night. Music played, human ballads and orc rhythms finding common ground. Food from both cultures covered long tables. People danced, laughed, told stories. Felix and Grusha moved through it all together, their hands never far from each other, basking in the warmth of a community they had built from nothing. Late in the evening, General Thorne approached them with a proposal. The Empire is establishing a formal border integration council, a group dedicated to facilitating cooperation between human and orc communities. They want you two to lead it. Grusha raised an eyebrow. Us. We are barely managing this one settlement. You are managing a community that should not exist according to everyone who said it was impossible. That is exactly the expertise needed. Thorne smiled. Think about it. No rush, but the offer stands. After he left, Felix and Grusha looked at each other. Another impossible task, Felix said. Seems to be our specialty. Should we do it? Grusha glanced around at their community, at the evidence of what determination and hope could build. I think we should, but later. For now, I want to enjoy being married to you without immediately taking on saving the whole world. That sounds perfect. They stayed up late with their friends, celebrating the marriage and the community and the simple fact of survival against long odds. When the last guests finally departed and they retreated to their home, their shared home now, officially and completely, Felix pulled Grusha close in the darkness. "Thank you," he whispered. "For what?" "For letting me tear up that order. For trusting me. For building all of this with me." Grusha kissed his forehead, his cheeks, his lips. "Thank you for seeing me, for choosing the hard path, for making me believe in impossible things." They made love slowly, tenderly, a married couple beginning their life together. Afterward, tangled in sheets and each other, they talked about their future, the council position, expanding the community, the challenges that would come. "It will never be fully easy," Grusha said. "There will always be people who hate what we represent. Then we will face them together. Like we face everything. Together," she agreed and settled against him, her breathing evening into sleep. Felix lay awake a while longer, listening to his wife breathe, feeling the solid warmth of her beside him. He thought about the man he had been, riding east with a kill order in his saddlebag and doubt in his heart. That man could never have imagined this a home, a community, a love that defied categorization. He had torn up the kill order expecting nothing but his own death or exile. Instead, he had found life, purpose, a future built on the radical idea that different did not mean enemy. In the morning, they would wake and face whatever challenges came. They would work on their homestead, help their neighbors, plan for the council position that might expand their impact beyond this single valley. There would be setbacks and struggles. Not everyone would accept them or what they had built. But tonight, Felix simply held his wife and felt grateful for the moment he had chosen conscience over orders, for the sight of a young orc woman perched on a rock refusing to back down, for every step that had led him to this impossible, perfect place. The community continued to grow over the following years. More families arrived, drawn by stories of a place where mixed heritage was welcomed rather than persecuted. Felix and Grusha took the council position, working to establish similar communities throughout the border regions. It was slow work, often frustrating, but gradually the map filled with settlements where humans and orcs lived side by side. They faced opposition, of course. Conservative factions in both the Empire and the orc clans pushed back against integration. There were incidents of burned barn here, threatening letters there. But the communities endured, supported by General Thorn's protection and by their own determination. Felix and Grusha's settlement became a model and a symbol. Maris Chen wrote a book about their journey, from the torn kill order to the thriving community. It became required reading in imperial military academies, a case study in questioning unjust orders and building peace. 3 years into their marriage, Grusha discovered she was pregnant. The news sent ripples through both their community and beyond. A child of both worlds, biological proof that the divide could be bridged. The pregnancy was difficult. Orc-human hybrids were rare, and medical knowledge was limited. But their community rallied, pooling knowledge from both cultures. The healer who had tended their wounds after the fort battle came to stay with them. An orc midwife traveled from Grusha's former clan, sent by her father who had finally broken his silence to offer support. Felix held Grusha's hand through every difficult day, every moment of uncertainty. "We have faced worse," he reminded her, "not with a child depending on us. Then we will face this too, together." Their daughter was born on a morning when snow fell soft and silent, turning the world clean and new. She had her mother's green skin and her father's blue eyes, small tusks and delicate human features. She was perfect and impossible and utterly real. They named her Sarah, a human name, and gave her the clan name of Ironhide, honoring both her heritages. She became the community's child, doted on by orc warriors and human farmers alike, growing up surrounded by love and acceptance. More children followed not just for Felix and Grusha, but throughout the community. Each birth was a small victory, proof that this new world could sustain itself. The children played together without the prejudices of their parents' generation, inventing games that blended both cultures. Felix taught his daughters to raid and ride, to think critically and question unjust authority. Grusha taught them to track and fight, to be proud of what they were and never apologize for existing. Together they raised children who belonged fully to both worlds and entirely to themselves. The Border Integration Council expanded its mandate. Felix and Grusha traveled to communities across the region, helping establish new settlements, mediating disputes, training local leaders. Their reputation grew the deserter and the exile who had built something lasting from nothing. General Thorn retired and was replaced by one of his proteges, a woman who had grown up near an integrated community and understood their value. Imperial policy slowly shifted. Treaties were strengthened. Mixed marriages gained legal recognition. It was gradual change, the kind that lasted because it was built on foundation stones rather than sudden revolution. Grusha's former clan leader died, and her father became the new leader. He sent word asking her to visit to bring her family. The journey back to her childhood home was emotional and strange. The clan that had exiled her now greeted her with cautious respect, curious about the human she had married and the children she had raised. Felix stood in an orc village, surrounded by warriors who had once been enemies, and felt the weight of how far they had come. Sarah and her younger sister played with orc children, their mixed heritage unremarkable to the young generation. Grusha's father, a massive orc with graying hair and tired eyes, approached them. "I was wrong," he said simply. "To exile you, to think that helping humans betrayed our people. You found a better path." Grusha embraced him, years of hurt beginning to heal. "It was not just me, it was him." She looked at Felix. He saw me as a person first. That changed everything. Then I owe him gratitude, her father said, and perhaps an apology for my short-sightedness. Felix shook his hand, feeling the incredible strength in that grip. We all carry the prejudices we were taught. What matters is whether we question them. They stayed a week, building bridges between the clan and their settlement. When they left, it was with trade agreements and cultural exchange plans. The isolation was ending, connection by connection. 10 years after Felix had torn up the kill order, the community held an anniversary celebration. What had started as one homestead now encompassed dozens of families across multiple settlements. The original house Felix and Grusha had built with their own hands had been expanded, added onto, until it was more compound than cottage. The celebration drew people from across the region. Former soldiers and former enemies, now friends and neighbors. Maris Chen attended with her husband, still documenting the story's evolution. General Thorne's daughter came with her orc husband and their 3 children. The community had become proof that the impossible was merely difficult. Felix stood before the gathered crowd, Grusha beside him, their daughters at their feet. He had not planned a speech, but words came easily. 10 years ago, I was given an order that would have made me a murderer, he said. I tore it up and met the woman who would become my wife, my partner, my conscience. Together we built this. He gestured to the crowd, the homes, the life they had created. Not because we were special or chosen, but because we chose each other. We chose to believe that different did not mean enemy. That love could cross any divide. That the world could change if we were brave enough to change ourselves first. Grusha took his hand. We were 2 exiles who found home in each other, and from that small beginning all of this grew. Every person here is proof that what we were told was impossible is actually just hard. Hard, but worth it. The crowd erupted in applause and cheers. Sarah tugged on Felix's sleeve, and he lifted her up, his daughter perched on his shoulders as Grusha held their younger children. They stood together, a family that should not exist by old logic, surrounded by a community that had grown from one torn order, and 2 people brave enough to choose conscience over comfort. That evening, after the celebration wound down and their children were asleep, Felix and Grusha sat on the porch of their home, watching stars emerge in the darkening sky. You think it will last? Grusha asked. What we have built? Felix considered the question. Not forever, maybe. Nothing does, but long enough to change how people think. Long enough that our children and their children will grow up in a different world than we did. A better world, a different one, which gives them the chance to make it better. Grusha leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. I never thought I would have this. Marriage, children, community. After my exile, I thought I was finished. You were just beginning. We were just beginning. They sat in comfortable silence, 2 people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something lasting. The orc woman who had been labeled a monster. The human soldier who had chosen conscience over duty. Together, they had proven that the narratives people told about enemies and differences were just stories, and stories could be rewritten by those brave enough to pick up the pen. Inside their home, their children slept peacefully, dreaming whatever dreams children dream. Around them, the community they had built settled into night, secure in the knowledge that here, at least, different meant beautiful rather than dangerous. Felix thought about that moment 10 years ago, standing in his tent with a kill order in his hands and a choice before him. It had seemed so stark then, duty or conscience, order or chaos. He could never have imagined that choosing conscience would lead here, to this porch, this woman, this life so full it sometimes felt like it would burst from his chest. I would do it again, he said softly. Grusha knew exactly what he meant. So would I, every hard moment, every struggle. All of it to end up here, together, always together. They stayed up late, talking about plans for the community, dreams for their children, the work still ahead. Eventually, exhaustion pulled them inside to their bed to each other. They made love with the comfortable familiarity of a decade together, tender and passionate and right. Afterward, in the darkness, Felix whispered, "I love you." Grusha's response was immediate. "I love you too, more than I have words for." They fell asleep tangled together. The orc woman and the human man who had torn up an unjust order and built a world where such orders no longer made sense. Outside, the community they had created continued its quiet life. Inside, two people who had chosen each other chose each other again in sleep, in dreams, in the certainty that morning would come and they would face it together. The story could have ended there, neat and settled. But life rarely works that way. Another 5 years passed, bringing new challenges and deeper roots. Sarah grew into a confident teenager, her sister following close behind. More communities formed, the network expanding. Felix and Grusha's work with the council took them across the region, but they always came home to the settlement that started everything. Then came the day a messenger arrived from the capital, bearing news that would test everything they had built. The emperor himself requested their presence. A formal audience. The implications were enormous and unclear. It could be a trap, Grusha said, reading the summons for the third time, or it could be recognition, legitimacy. Felix paced their kitchen, mind working through possibilities. General Thorn will be there. He would not let us walk into danger. You cannot know that. No, but we have to take the risk. If the Empire is finally ready to formally acknowledge integrated communities, to make policy instead of just allowing exceptions, then we have to be there to advocate for it, Grusha finished. I know. Does not mean I have to like it. They traveled to the capital with a small delegation, a mix of humans and orcs from their community, carefully chosen to represent what they had built. The journey took 2 weeks, and every mile brought them deeper into territory where their mixed group drew stares and whispers. The capital was overwhelming after years on the frontier. Massive stone buildings, crowds, noise, politics thick enough to choke on. They were given rooms in the palace complex, a sign of respect that did not quite ease their wariness. General Thorn met them privately the evening before the audience. "The Emperor is genuinely interested in what you have accomplished," he said. "But there are factions at court who oppose integration. They will use this audience to undermine you if they can." "Let them try," Grusha said. "We have faced worse than politicians." The audience took place in a vast hall, sunlight streaming through high windows onto marble floors. Courtiers lined the walls, their expensive clothes and calculating expressions a stark contrast to the simple frontier garb Felix and Grusha wore. At the far end, on a raised throne, sat Emperor Marcus III, a man in his 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Felix and Grusha approached together, their delegation behind them. They bowed as protocol required, but not subserviently. They were representatives of something real, not supplicants begging favor. "Captain Brennan," the Emperor said, his voice carrying, "or should I say former captain? You have caused quite a bit of controversy. Never intentionally, Your Majesty, only as a consequence of doing what seemed right. And you, Grusha Ironhide, exile from your clan, labeled insurgent by our forces. Yet here you stand, married to a human, mother to mixed children, leader of a thriving community." The Emperor leaned forward. "Tell me, what made you think you could succeed where centuries of conflict had failed?" Grusha met his gaze steadily. "We did not think about success or failure. We thought about survival, about building something small and good. The rest grew from that. A courtier stepped forward, his expression disdainful. Your Majesty, these communities are aberrations. Mixing human and orc bloodlines violates natural law. They weaken both races. My children are not weak, Grusha said, her voice cold. They are the best of both worlds. They are mongrels, the courtier spat. Felix moved before thinking, putting himself between the courtier and Grusha. Choose your next words very carefully. Is that a threat? In the Emperor's presence. It is a warning that insulting a man's family has consequences, regardless of location. Tension crackled through the hall. Guards shifted, hands moving toward weapons. Then the Emperor laughed, a genuine sound that cut through the building violence. Peace, all of you. Lord Corvus, you overstep. These people are guests and deserve courtesy. The Emperor stood, descending from his throne to approach them directly. I did not summon you here to debate philosophy or bloodlines. I summoned you because your communities work. They are stable, productive, and they are spreading. That suggests something valuable. He stopped before Felix and Grusha, studying them with those sharp eyes. I am proposing formal imperial recognition. Your settlements would receive official protection, legal status, resource allocation. In exchange, you would continue expanding the model, help establish more integrated communities, serve as examples. What is the cost? Grusha asked. There is always a cost, scrutiny. Oversight, you would answer to the council, submit to inspections, prove that this model works long-term. The Emperor smiled faintly. And you would become symbols, whether you want that or not. The orc woman and the human deserter who built peace from chaos. That is a powerful story, but stories come with burdens. Felix and Grusha looked at each other. Years of partnership meant they could communicate volumes without words. The offer was real, the benefits substantial. But it would change everything, formalize what had been organic, put their community under constant examination. We need to consult our people, Felix said. This affects more than just us. Of course, take 3 days, then give me your answer. The delegation gathered that evening in their quarters, debating late into the night. Some saw opportunity, others feared losing their autonomy. Sarah, who had insisted on coming despite her youth, spoke with wisdom beyond her years. We have proven it works, she said. But we are just one region. If this helps spread integrated communities everywhere, helps children like me grow up accepted, is not that worth some oversight? An older orc, one of the original refugees Grusha had helped, shook his head. Imperial recognition means imperial control. They could withdraw support anytime we displease them. They could also attack us anytime if we do not accept, a human farmer pointed out. At least this way we have legal protection. The debate continued, but gradually consensus formed. The risk was worth the potential reward. They would accept the Emperor's offer, but with conditions: local autonomy in community decisions, guaranteed protections written into law, and the right to refuse inspectors who proved hostile or biased. Felix and Grusha presented their answer to the Emperor 2 days later. He listened to their conditions without interruption, then nodded slowly. Acceptable. I will have the agreements drawn up. He paused, then added more quietly, You two have done something remarkable. Do not let the politics that come next diminish that. The formalization process took months. Treaties were written, legal frameworks established, resources allocated. Felix and Grusha found themselves spending more time in meetings than in their fields, navigating bureaucracy with the same determination they had once used to survive in the wilderness. But the benefits became apparent quickly. New settlements received support from the start instead of struggling in isolation. Mixed families gained legal recognition, their marriages and children officially acknowledged. Trade networks formed between communities, human and orc goods flowing freely. Opposition persisted, of course. There were protests in conservative districts. Some orc clans refused any cooperation. A few settlements faced vandalism and threats. But the momentum was undeniable. What Felix and Grusha had started was becoming movement, policy, cultural shift. 5 years after the imperial audience, their original settlement celebrated its 20th anniversary. The young couple who had met over a torn kill order were now middle-aged, their children grown or nearly so. Sarah was training to take over the council work, her mixed heritage an asset rather than burden. The community had expanded to hundreds of families across dozens of settlements. Felix's hair had gone gray at the temples. Grusha's strength was as formidable as ever, but she moved with the careful deliberation of accumulated injuries. They had earned every scar, every gray hair, every moment of the life they had built. The anniversary celebration was smaller than the 10th-year event, more intimate. Just their community, the people who lived daily the reality of integration. There were speeches, yes, and toasts and music. But mostly there was laughter and children playing and neighbors sharing food. As evening fell, Felix and Grusha slipped away from the celebration, walking to the hill above their house where they could see the entire valley. Lights from dozens of homes twinkled in the dusk. Smoke rose from chimneys. Life continued, ordinary and extraordinary. 20 years, Grusha said softly, since you tore up that order. Best decision I ever made. Even with all the difficulty, the politics, the threats, the constant fighting to justify our existence, Felix turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. Especially with all that. Because it means something. We built something that matters, that will outlive us. Our children will live in a world where their existence is not controversial. That is worth every hard moment. Grusha kissed him, tender and deep. When they separated, tears gleamed in her eyes. I never told you how scared I was that first night, when you showed up with that torn order. I thought you would change your mind, that you would realize what you were throwing away and kill me after all. Never, Felix said fiercely. From the moment I saw you, saw who you really were instead of the label they put on you, I was yours, have been ever since. And I am yours, always. They stood on that hill as stars emerged, two people who had chosen love over hate, conscience over convenience, each other over everything. Below them, the community they had built continued its evening rituals. Above them, the sky opened into infinity. Between, in that perfect present moment, they held each other and knew they had lived their lives right. The story ends here, with Felix and Grusha still together, their love as strong as the day they first admitted it. Their children would carry on the work, expand it, build new futures from the foundation their parents had laid. Challenges would come, they always did. But the precedent was set, the path marked out. An orc woman and a human man had met over a torn kill order. They had built trust from nothing, love from unlikely circumstances, a community from exile and determination. They had proven that the divisions people fought over were constructed, not inevitable. That different could mean beautiful. That love could cross any divide if two people were brave enough to try. Years would pass. Felix and Grusha would eventually grow old together, their bodies slowing but their bond only deepening. They would watch grandchildren play in the valley they had tamed, see their ideas spread across the empire and beyond. And when their time finally came, years or decades in the future, they would face that last journey together as they had faced everything. But that ending was still far ahead. For now, on this anniversary evening, they descended from their hill hand in hand and returned to the celebration. To their community. to the life they had chosen and built and defended with everything they were. Felix Brennan, who had torn up a kill order and chosen conscience over duty. Grusha Ironhide, who had been exiled for kindness and found family in unexpected places. Together they were proof that one moment of moral courage could change everything. That two people determined to do right could build something that would outlast them. That love, the real kind that was also partnership and respect and choice, could overcome anything. They danced that night, orc and human together, surrounded by the community that was their legacy. Their daughters danced too, free and unafraid, children of two worlds and fully at home in both. Music played, mixing human melodies with orc rhythms into something entirely new. Laughter rang out under the stars, and if someone had asked Felix in that moment if he regretted his choice, if he wished for the simpler life of following orders and avoiding complications, he would have laughed and held his wife closer and said no. Absolutely not. Not ever. Because this life full of love and purpose and difficulty and triumph, this was what he had been meant to find all along. The kill order had been torn up 20 years ago. In its place, Felix and Grusha had written something better. A story of hope, of choosing right over easy, of love powerful enough to change the world one person, one family, one community at a time. It was their story, but it was also bigger than them now. It belonged to everyone who believed that the future could be different from the past. That enemies could become partners, that exile could lead to home. As the celebration continued into the night, Felix and Grusha held each other close and knew, with the certainty of 2 decades together, that they had succeeded in the most important way. They had loved well. They had chosen each other and kept choosing each other through everything. And from that simple, profound choice, an entire world had grown.